All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Neary Building Committee meeting. It is Monday, March 4th, 2024. It is 7:34 p.m. All voting members except for Kathy are present. She is tied up with the select board meeting tonight, and will join us if they end before we do. First order of business is approval of meeting minutes. Were there any questions or comments on those? I am seeing none, so I will make a motion to approve the February 5th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Denise?
Aye.
Andrew?
Abstain.
Chris? So we stepped away for a second. Mark?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
And I am I. Chris, I'll go to you one more time if you're back. Otherwise, we'll keep moving. All right, so that's going to go down as a 402 vote, if I got that right. Next is, so I'm going to skip over the February 29th, 2024 meeting minutes. That was for the open forum. I will type up something very brief because we did have a quorum there. We'll talk a little bit more about it next, at the end. Next is subcommittee reports. Andrew, anything to report from the finance subcommittee in Kathy's absence?
I think we approved the last invoice for, I don't know what it was, $9,000. So
Okay.
crazy.
Communications, just very briefly, we expect to meet imminently here, likely the end of the week. We're doing some scheduling logistics earlier today. And we do expect that there will be a website launched. What content's on it was still to be determined, but we do expect a website by the end of the month. So that is moving forward. Any questions on finance or communications?
Jason, I'm trying to get my hand raised here. So
Go
that
ahead.
meeting hasn't actually been scheduled yet, right? We're as far as the communication subcommittee meeting at the end of the week, it's still bouncing around a little bit.
It's looking like Friday at 1 p.m., subject to one more confirmation.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will let you know for sure, though. Mark, I see your hand up.
Sure. In the future, could we add a third item in the subcommittee reports? Just getting some sort of updates from the leadership group. We don't hear what they've discussed, what has been going on in the background, what decisions might have been made that might impact the project. I just think even if nothing has occurred or they haven't met, at least something that we can get in so that if we have questions or comments, we have the opportunity to make them.
The good news is that's the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
So the main purpose, the full disclosure, leadership group did have a discussion last week, and it's to frame the agenda that eventually gets posted and then discussed here. So I can confirm that your request will actually be honored through the following sub bullets that we're going to walk through in great detail.
Okay.
Perfect. Jim, are you going to be the one sharing the screen?
Yep. Yeah, I have the presentation ready.
Okay, so I am going to turn this over to Jim and team. If anyone else needs co-host privileges, just yell at me throughout here. While Jim goes through this, just so you know, I'm going to be sending you 2 additional documents for discussion at a later point in the meeting. They don't relate to at least this agenda topic. This we will follow the document that originally was presented to us by Skanska and Arrow Street in the packet that was distributed last week. So with that being said, Jim, I'll turn it to you, your team, and the Arrow Street team for an update.
Sure. All right, I'll share my screen here. All right, so quickly, it's been a busy the last 30 days, this last month since we last met. We've had 3 visioning sessions and a programming workshop. So thanks to Greg and staff and everybody for that. That's a lot of work, but important work. We had over the school break existing conditions and site survey at Neary. So we had all the sub-consultants go through. The report will be issued in the next couple of weeks, following up on that. And to that point, Mark, the 2 working group meetings were held. And as Jason alluded to, we're pretty much covering what the discussions in those meetings. And then we also had the community forum earlier this month. So Larry or Katie, do you want to add anything as far as existing conditions or the visioning?
For the existing conditions, we had folks come out to the building, like you said, Jim, about a week or 2 ago. We're going to have a draft of that around the 15th. Working groups, we had another good session today.
Katie, you're pretty faint coming through.
We're gonna try this. Okay,
That's a lot clearer coming from you, Larry.
okay. Did that work better? Can you guys hear us okay now?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Stand by. Mhm. Oh, there we go. Sorry, guys. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. And there we go. Now we're getting some feedback on our end. Sorry, we are all in the same room. So we just finished up, I guess, visioning session 3 officially. But in any event, it's been a good series of meetings with both the district leadership and the teachers and staff of Neary. Actually, all the schools, because we've had folks participating from Finn and Woodward as well. Really nice discussions, going back and forth, trying to get a good sense of what people are interested in. Today's was sort of tying together the educational thinking with the spatial ideas. So a lot of examples and a lot of fun and exciting thinking. So we're nearing the end. I think we've got one more session on the 11th, which is to kind of run through and allow folks to do some manipulations with some either blocks or 2-dimensional forms that are sort of room sizes, and allow people to try and put together different spaces on the fly, and then those get rolled into the work as well. And then that'll all get rolled up and into a series of notes and other meeting minutes and things that document the effort. So it's been nice, and it seems like folks are enjoying it.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then upcoming for the next 30 days, programming workshop, March 11th. As Katie alluded to, the March 15th, that'll be the existing conditions draft report will go out. We have a working group meeting scheduled right now for March 28th. Building performance workshop will be scheduled over the next month. The next community forum will be next Monday at 7 o'clock. And then obviously we're going to have a building committee meeting on March 18th. And then community forum for the educational program summary, basically the results of the visioning. That's going to be TBD as far as a date. We'll have to discuss that.
Jim, just one thing, we were talking about having the building performance workshop at the meeting on the 18th. So for anybody who's interested in hearing about our concepts and just sort of a broad overview of everything to do with the building performance, our colleague Kate Bobrisky is going to be at that meeting and tell everyone all about it.
And Mark, that's a good example of a decision that they tried to bring to the working group that we said is not for the working group and is for the NBC to decide. So just an example, I'll try to chime in where necessary on that sort of stuff, but that's what we're gonna do on the 18th.
All right. And then just we know where we are right now, existing conditions and assessment, and then next is going to be moving into options once we get the educational program done and visioning. So that's the long-term schedule here. As far as budget, so further on in the agenda, we'll review Arrow Street supplemental services. So right now, we're committed to 942,818, with 7,182 remaining. So once we review and approve the supplemental conditions, that's all the contractual items locked in. So we're tight with the budget, but we do have a little bit of wiggle room for if there's any future expenditures. And also we're starting to submit our pro-pay requests to the state for reimbursement. And that is all we had.
Any questions or comments? Jim, I'll start with one. Community Forum 3, which obviously seems like there's gonna be a significant amount of content to present. I know you don't have a date, but just give us an idea. Is that an April thing, a May thing, a June thing?
So I would think it would be the beginning part of April. Larry or Katie, I assume you would agree with that timing.
Yeah, I would agree, and I was just thinking that Jim is essentially by the middle of this month, we'll be done with a lot of our efforts, both the existing conditions as well as the educational. Give us a little time to pull it together in early April. We can start to schedule something, and I guess the question would be, where do we want to slide it in terms of the date in the community? If there's big events coming up, we want to avoid those. I don't think we'd be into school vacation. The April break is usually
It's around the
towards the
middle.
month.
That's the 15th or so.
Right. So just sort of working around that and trying to get some get that on people's calendars.
So you're saying before the April break?
Yes.
Okay. And Greg, Northborough's town meeting is when? Not, because I know that ties up your team.
It is Monday, April 22nd.
Okay, so it's after the break. Okay. All right. So I guess my request, just out of courtesy, especially to our school administrators, that you all throw out some dates you'll be ready by, and we'll try to schedule that both from a space perspective and scheduling perspective.
Yeah, we actually have an internal meeting tomorrow with us and Arrow Street, so we'll talk through some dates and see what makes the best sense and get it out to the group.
Okay. Are there any other questions on what has been discussed thus far? I just wanted to commend and thank all those that have been involved in the visioning. I wish it could be an even broader group than has, but obviously we run, at least the 7 of us run afoul of open meeting law considerations, but there's been a lot of time and energy put into that. And I know for sure, as one, I'm looking forward to kind of what the output is. And I think that's where this is going to really even get more exciting. But there's also been a ton of educators involved, not just the school administration, that are doing that in addition to their other day jobs as well. So I just wanted to reach out to them and also thank some of the parents that represented some of the SOS organizations and other constituency groups at each of the elementary schools for their time. It wasn't a short amount of time. It ended up being about a day's worth of time spread over 2 days. So no shortage of volunteer time there as well. With that, Jim, why don't we pull up the chart and I'll give an opening. And I ask the committee bear with us for a second. So one of the things that the MSBA at this point in the process does is that they look to get alignment on each of the scenarios that our design team will be responding to and providing, feasibility around. I'd ask you not focus on the chart for a second and hear out kind of the discussion. At the end of the day, we're going to be asked to respond to 12 potential scenarios related to both the Neary and Woodward schools. The magic to why Neary and why Woodward is because those are the two schools that we submitted statements of interest on 3 to 4 years ago, well before even this committee came to fruition. There are some scenarios that some of you will look at on the screen that you'll say, how in the world would we even respond to that? Or why would we even look at that? I'd ask that we not focus our attention on that tonight. That's for our design team to quickly help us narrow some of these scenarios. And instead, what I would just ask that the team here do is make sure that there wasn't a scenario that you were anticipating seeing that is not on here. And I'll also add one more caveat is, and know there's been discussion at prior meetings about the Neary site overall, right? And obviously all the feasibility that's going to have to go into making sure that that site is buildable and all the other things. If for whatever reason we find that the Neary site is not feasible to the type of construction we're looking for, this does not box us into just looking at that site. We could go look at other sites. I'll give an example of you could still look at the Neary site or any other parcel in town, but it would be only under these configurations that you see on the screen. So we're not really necessarily talking about sites. All we're talking about is concepts of how it would work in that theoretical example. The final point I will make is do not get distracted, because I will say guilty as charged for me. I got very distracted when I first saw the email from the MSBA of why would they even ask us to study some of this, but I have been quickly comforted by the discussion that we've had with our design team of this being normal course, in that some of these candidly will be, we just need to provide the MSBA some facts in some self-growth specific details. So again, the question looking at this is making sure that there are not options that you had or thought we'd be looking at as part of feasibility that are not on the screen. That's what we're discussing. We are not discussing the viability of any of these at this point. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and see what questions or comments the committee has.
Jason, just to make sure I'm reading it right. So it would be consolidate Neary and Woodward. That means closing Finn, right? Not consolidating to them, not from them. That makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
That's how I read it. I just want to make sure. I would almost put that in there, like going from 4 schools to 3. If that makes sense. Or
This isn't our chart. This is the MSBA's.
yeah. But I mean, like when we present it to people, it's a little confusing.
Right. Yeah. I think, not to go down a rabbit hole, Andrew, I think, and I'm violating the rule I already set up, but I think it's important to answer your question and get you comfortable. is I think part of the study we're going to ask our design team to do is consolidation even possible?
Yeah.
In this 3-grade configuration in the middle, based on the infrastructure at the remaining schools? That's a question I would hope they would be able to answer. I think the use of the word consolidated in that middle column is somewhat presumptive, subject to further analysis.
Yeah, agreed.
Versus the far right side, I think that's got to be a fact. You would never go build a 4-grade school or do whatever you want to do, addition and renovation, without some sort of consolidation in play.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, kind of what you alluded to. But some of these are more, let's present some facts. We're not going to run a whole, maybe not run a whole design, you know, architectural design on some of these, because it doesn't really make the dollars and cents worth it. But
Right. The good news is, and I've already apologized to Aero Street in advance for this comment, is, I mean, they're on a fixed fee contract to run through the feasibility analysis, but I think my vote would be, obviously, if we can easily start to narrow some of these down and the MSB is on board through their very specific process, obviously our dollars in time are best spent focusing on the viable scenarios.
yeah, makes sense. Thank
Other questions or comments? Mark?
Yeah, and I may be going down the wrong path, but under the middle option, 450 students, you've got some base code upgrade with a yes, so I assume that'll be analyzed. Why isn't that listed as yes in the 610 proposal?
Because there's no way that you would be able to fit 610 students into the existing footprint of Neary.
No. I guess the yes is under Woodward.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to need to show there for it to actually be eligible for a base repair, and welcome Aero Street validating this, is can 450 students even fit in the existing footprint of Woodward?
So let's see if I can help out with that. The base repair is sort of a funny category of things, and it assumes that you're fixing the building you have and not necessarily making educational improvements. And really it's intended, as all these are intended, is to allow the district and the building committee to answer questions that are likely to come up from the community, such as, well, did you ever look at just fixing our existing building? What would that take? And that's really what the MSBA is trying to get you to do there. So really, they're just saying, we want you to tell us for Neary and for Woodward, what's the base repair scheme and what's it going to cost, rough numbers. And the reason it's probably not listed more than the once each is because you only do it once for each building.
Okay. So whatever you answer in the middle option for Woodward, you're answering for the 610 office for Woodward. Am I correct?
It's essentially the same, right?
Okay.
It's
And I'll defer. I'll wait. I was going to ask, what code upgrades does Woodward need offhand? Are we looking at something big? My assumption is everything's fine at that school.
I think that goes in the category of they need to do their job and
Okay.
come back to us.
That's fine.
Yeah, I can't say we can give you a list. Oftentimes it's things like replace the roof or fix accessibility, boiler repairs, things like that. But if Woodward is in great shape, then you're right. There's probably not a lot there to do.
Okay.
You good, Mark?
I'm good.
All right, Roger was next in line.
Just so that I can understand this, middle column again. So in every one of these scenarios, are we saying that which Which school are we saying has 450 students?
We're not saying any school has 450
Well,
students. We're saying that
we're saying that 450 students is gonna be distributed amongst the two?
the 450 is from the enrollment letter that we signed with the MSBA. So they're saying that they estimate that on average grades 3 to 5 have 450 students, and that's what we are allowed to look at for a 3-grade configuration school in terms of occupancy.
All right, so then just take me another step on this. So we've got a grade 3 to 5, and that's gonna be, this option again is grades 3 through 5 at Neary, correct?
Or they're also having us look at the Woodward site.
Right.
Well, don't we have an issue where we really can't put any more students at Woodward anyway? Because we can't really, there's no more room to build on that site? So
That's what the design team needs to validate. That was our
Okay.
internal conclusion
okay,
as a district in the prior committee that Kathy and Couture and I were on.
because
But yes.
yeah, it seems to me that this really goes nowhere based on that, but all right.
So if I may, just so
Yeah.
all of these, the district submitted a statement of interest. And when they were accepted into the grant program, the district signed a feasibility study agreement. Part of that feasibility study agreement includes these 3 scenarios and includes a requirement that we look at each one of these: base repair, addition, renovation, new construction. What this is setting up is what needs to be included in our first submission to the MSBA, which is the PDP, the Preliminary Design Program. So the expectations that's being set up is that within that submittal, each one of these scenarios is addressed. And meaning that a base repair at Woodward, if the occupancy can't fit that, then we just have to include that, state that, and include backup information for it. So really that's what all of this is leading up to. It's just setting up the requirements for that first submission to the MSBA so they can look through and basically check the box and make sure that we addressed all 12 of these. So just want to make sure.
Jim, so again, through the chair, may I, Jason? So then just respond to one other box. Pick a box, pick one of the other Woodward boxes. Add REN, new construction. In neither case, right, you're gonna have the same result, likely in either case, because both of those cases really involve the higher population of students at the school, and we know that that's probably gonna be a non-starter, right? You're just gonna have to deal with each case separately as you respond to the MSBA, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
I got it. Thank you.
In Roger, just to add more comfort to kind of where they're going, like for example, there's the Choate Field restriction out front that bounds the boundaries of that property. So what we've been working on with folks like Mark Purple is like making sure Arrow Street has all the right documentation, understand the boundary lines, right? So that they can accurately respond, especially to like a renovation scenario.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Denise, you're next.
So a couple of my questions were answered, but I'm just going to throw this out. In looking at this, I'm not sure what anybody plans to do with this, and hopefully this is not going to be to general public, because I think people are going to be totally confused. It's going to be misinterpreted as to what this is all about. And I can see people saying, well, wait a minute, what's happening? Where are the kids from Finn going to go? I think this is hard for us to understand, which we're now being schooled to understand this, but I would not like to see this just sent out to the general public, because I think there's going to be mass confusion. That's just my honest opinion.
I personally don't have any intention of sending it out, but obviously that's something as we go through communication moving forward, I think will also be, a charter, the committee, not to dive too much into the open forum, but I do think when people do ask about likely scenarios, and when Greg has been on his rotating tour to some of the schools, no one has presented this chart. No one has even talked about some of these iterations. But I think very quickly, we're going to start talking about a few of these iterations as likely scenarios subject to feedback. And I think we all probably have ideas of where that may go. But I completely agree, Denise. It's kind of mind-blowing, even to those of us that are in the middle of this. So at least any community, I mean, we have a very strict communication protocol, so I think we hopefully don't have to worry about that.
Because I think the biggest concern I have is people are originally going to say, well, wait a minute, I don't understand any of this. What are you doing with, the kids that are coming out of Finn? And so even though I understand what we're doing here now, it's just that if you're not schooled and understanding with the help of our design team, then you really are not going to be able to understand this. That's just my fright.
And I think the other good news is that the one benefit, as much as this may sound crazy now, is by going through this, the MSBA hopes that we have talked through every potential feasible scenario, even if it really didn't get more than, 10 feet off the ground, so that we can dispel any comments later on of, why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you look at that? When we get to presenting an option, that would be, subject to funding.
And I think it has to be understood that this, with the state building committee, this is not what we were asked to do. We were asked to just look at these two schools and the scenarios between the two. We didn't opt to put in, Finn. So I just think that would be confusing, and I want to make sure everybody understands. That's why it's not an option to be looked at as to what we're going to do with those.
Okay, Andrew?
So if, say under these scenarios, say we said Woodward new construction, would we be eligible for MSBA reimbursement for that?
I'll let maybe Skinsker or Street Team answer that question.
Yes, yeah, if it's within any of these, we would be eligible for.
I just wasn't sure, we applied for Neary. If in the assessment of Neary, we realized we needed to, say, renovate Neary and Woodward, right, we would still be eligible for MSBA reimbursement on the Woodward part.
Yep, if we're within these options,
Okay.
they're eligible. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So, and Andrew, just to clarify, we originally applied for Neary, but as part of the discussion and being transparent with the MSBA, they did have us apply for Woodward too.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
That was a year later. I think that happened. Kathy, go ahead.
So that's what you just said is new news to me, because I thought someone said in the last 48 hours that we would have to almost start all over if we wanted to submit a construction project for Woodward, but it sounds like that's not the case based on what Earl Street just said. Agree?
The only thing we cannot touch is the existing Finn school. We did not ever submit anything related to the Finn school.
Without starting all over.
Without
Right.
submitting an addendum that sets you back in the process. You don't go back to the starting line, but you definitely go backwards.
Okay, so my real question is as follows. So going horizontal, those three grade configurations, we had already agreed with a year ago with MSBA. That's what we were going to, that's what was going to be studied, right? So tonight, is this matrix something that MSBA put together and said, we want you guys to agree that this is what you're going to come back to us with analysis of all 12 options? Or did we go to MSBA and say, this is what we want to do? Do you agree? Who put this together?
MSBA, this is an MSBA document.
Okay, so they want us to approve that we agree this is what that they expect us to come back with 12 different analyses.
I'll put it another way. This is what they're asking for, but we're bringing it to the committee to make sure that nothing is missed. Technically, Greg could have just replied to their note and said, or the Aero Street team or the Skanska team could have said, yes, this is acknowledged and we're working on it, sort of thing.
And the reason I bring this up, there's 12. You remember at the last meeting, Jason and I were going, we don't see how there's 12. We thought there were 6, 2 times 3. So now we see why there's 12. So in the end, between now and August, Arrow Street is going to basically come back with analysis of 12 different permutations, correct?
Larry or team, you want to take that?
Yeah, I would say the MSBA says at a minimum, we have to look at 12. There may be others that the community decides for different reasons, whatever, that we want to look at. But what the MSBA is saying is at a minimum, we want to see 12. One thing I was going to suggest that we start to do, and we usually have to do this again as documentation for the MSBA, it might not go anywhere, but are there any other sites in town that you might consider for a school of either of these three scenarios? And typically there aren't other sites, and we just document, you know, here's 2 or 3 other sites. They're not big enough. They're bad locations, whatever. But again, a very thorough analysis so that at the end of the day, you've answered anybody's questions that might come up in town meeting.
And just to further on that point, with the first submission to the MSBA, the PDP, you know, a couple of these will be not feasible to study. The next step that we go into is start to further study the preferred options to get to a singular preferred option that we want to proceed into schematic design with. We don't have to continue to revisit these options that aren't feasible. We have to continue to document them, but basically taking it from the PDP and saying why these aren't feasible. So we don't have to do an in-depth study of base code repair at Woodward if it doesn't have the occupancy for it. So just so that's clear.
And what is the date for that?
For the PDP submission,
Yeah.
that is in, yeah, May.
So by May, you'll know whether you're going to throw out that metal column or not?
By May, once we submit to MSBA and they review, then they will come back with any comments.
Yeah, they usually, so the PDP you think of is that's setting up the problems or the questions to be addressed. In this case, 12 options. And then the PSR, you're really answering the question. PSR is the next step, which is what we submit in the fall. So it's typically, and some of them may fall out just by the nature of it in the PDP, but oftentimes you're just saying, here's the 12 options, here's the descriptions, here's all the issues. And then you begin to whittle them down in the PSR phase.
So you don't think you will have whittled down that middle column if it is appropriate to whittle it down with this first submission?
I think we'll have to see and decide. For instance, if you say Woodward can really only hold 200 students and we have to build an addition to hold another 250 students to make this 450 combined school there, there's no space. We may be able to, at the PDP level, say that that really doesn't work. Okay. On the other hand, we can say we're going to look at that, and then at the PSR level said we considered that and we did not think that worked, so we proceeded with a different scheme.
Kathy, that resolve your question?
It
Your
does.
comments?
It does.
Mark?
Yeah, if I go up to the title, middle column, doesn't matter. I think what makes it better for me is take out the word and say or. Really what you're studying is 450 students for grades 3 through 5, which could be located at Neary or Woodward. Am I correct? And bouncing off of Andrew's question, if we put them at Neary, we're still going to have to make modifications to put grades 1 through 2 at kindergarten 1 and 2 at Woodward, but we're not getting reimbursed for that. That has nothing to do with the 450 students. Am I correct?
I think we heard Jim say that it's a possibility. that the Woodward expenses, if that was the scenario we went with, could be subject to this because we submitted an application.
Okay, so if we choose Neary to hold the 450, that the extension of the additional work at Woodward would be included in the project as a whole? To incorporate grades 1, kindergarten 1 and 2 and preschool? I don't think so, but
The MSBA.
you're
will-
saying it is, then that's,
Yeah, it's an interesting point because K1 is not part of the MSBA enrollment that they're willing to reimburse on, or as part of the project, as they put it.
but grade 2 is.
But grade 2 is. So that becomes an interesting question. And as we get closer, I think it's worthwhile talking to the MSBA about that to
Then,
understand, because you'd certainly like to get some reimbursement if we can.
then I would quickly say, geez, but Woodward would make a great kindergarten and first grade, and we now need to deal with grade 2, which MSBA will reimburse us.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need to hone in on that at some point.
That's why I carefully use my words, the possibility, because we don't know how this is all going at this point.
Okay,
Roger, go ahead. You're on mute, Roger.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Most people like me better that way. So to follow up on Larry, that's not kind of you to laugh so loudly at that statement.
I'm enjoying your wit at the end of a long day.
Yeah, it's been a long day for sure. So Kathy, you said you thought that we had 6, didn't you? Or did I hear that wrong? And if
I
that's,
did.
well, why aren't you saying 7? Why aren't you saying 7? Because we've got the 4 over there in the far column and the 3 in the first column. What am I missing, or what?
So don't look at the matrix when I tell you how I got 6. I don't have Jason.
Okay,
I got 6 because I thought that there were 3 possible grade configurations, which you see those, and I
Yep.
thought there were 2 choices. Either we are going to rebuild Neary as a new school or substantially rehab. So I multiplied 3 times 2 as far as 2 choices go.
all right.
Each case. So so my 6 don't necessarily coincide with the 7 there.
All right, thank you. So my second comment, I guess, I've forgotten, was it Larry or Jim asked, I think it was Larry, you asked if we had other building sites, correct?
Yep. Mhm.
And we said no. Now, there potentially would be an issue if for some reason Neary came back as problematic, as being able to build on it, right? We would have to do something, I assume.
Mhm.
Which would, I guess, include finding another site? We just don't have it today. Is that true? Anyone?
Presumably, if Neary proved completely unbuildable, hypothetical there, and Woodward was too small to build anything substantial on,
Which it is.
then yes, we would be needing to look for other sites. One thing that came up with the MSBA is you could build a new building next to Finn if you decided that that was an appropriate way to proceed and to get the school that you need.
Okay.
So, and usually what happens is we end up looking very quickly. The town may or may not have other land. Usually it's pretty quick to discount those, but again, they want us to go through the effort and say, no other sites are available. These are the 2 sites, and then proceed onwards.
All right, thank you.
But that's also a question we don't have to answer tonight, right? When looking at this chart, right? That's a question we can react to if the news is unfortunate with the Neary site and for whatever reason.
So Jason, you brought this forth. Greg could have just said fine, but you brought it forth because you wanted to make sure the committee wasn't having a change of heart as far as what we wanted these options to be.
Yeah, I wish I wasn't bringing forward 12 options. The goal tonight is, and Kathy, I apologize, but like the one thing I said at the beginning is just making sure we're not missing a scenario that someone had in their head, whether viable or not, that they would have expected Arrow Street would be studying. I know we focused a lot on probably some of the scenarios that shouldn't be on this page. But I just want to make sure that before Arrow Street really goes off, because they do have a lot of work in front of them, as we can all acknowledge, that that there's nothing here that 2 months down the road someone's gonna be like, I thought we were looking at this. Why weren't we looking at this? It just seems like we're at a point where we just need to make sure that there's nothing that's in someone's mind that is missing from here.
So did anyone have another option?
Yeah,
Not that I've heard to date.
yeah, I think the only part, and I think Larry brought it up, is, we're at 12. There may end up being more. I'm thinking from like an addition renovation perspective, maybe it's okay, we do, tear down half of the building and have a new addition, or we keep the whole building and then do an addition, or so like I think that's kind of like in the scenarios when you get into those things, there might be iterative pieces, but I don't think it's like a whole option, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, but it kind of sounds like what you described fits into the addition / renovation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have a option 8A and option 8B.
Exactly.
So you guys are gonna earn your money.
And that's not to run away.
Yes, we will be looking at a lot of things. Sorry, we're all getting a chuckle in this room.
Are there any other questions or comments on this? This does not require a vote because we're not changing anything. Go ahead, Mark.
Good. If you're talking to Mark Purple, I'm seem to think we have the same deed restriction issue down at Finn with Moody Field as we do with Choate. And I think that should be presented as well to our group.
Mark Purple
Yeah.
just walked out. Mark, I'm not aware of that. Why do you think that?
When we did the work on Neary years ago, we ended up having to buy a house. And I'm trying to think where it was kind of right there on, and I seem to recall there was a huge restriction that we couldn't expand Neary, or not Neary, Finn, any closer to the fields because of the deed restriction. Those fields have existed for a long time down there, longer than any addition to Finn. And I was always under the impression they had the same kind of donation deed restriction that we're up against up at Choate. That's just my.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably start with Jim Haggerty post-election day tomorrow, because he probably will have a better access to that. But I think, yes, the Arrow Street team, I imagine you could plop in the address of the Finn School and see if there's any deed restrictions there as well.
Yeah, the other thing we sometimes run into is Article 97, dedicated parkland, which may also be a hindrance over at Finn.
Then you're going to run into that because they also use CPA funds, I think, for some of it, which has an automatic Article 97, but we can get into it.
Yeah.
Definitely pickleball courts there. They did lights. So yeah, there's a lot of CPA money that's at Finn outside.
Okay. So that might suggest there's Article 97 protection land there, in which case you can do that, but that's, as you all probably know, that's an act of the legislature and can be a difficult thing to obtain.
I'm going to take an optimistic view. Let's just hope that the current site works and we get all very comfortable with it. But yes, Mark, that's a tremendous point that we should just make sure we start to gather the data on and hope we never need it, other than just a good education for people that are curious about that stuff. All right, any other comments on this? All right. Next up is vote regarding Arrow Street supplemental services. I will turn this back to Jim and ask that if people want to follow along on their screen for anything Jim's not presenting, this is in the email I sent during the meeting. Jim, you'll have to walk through what you trued up between the version that I was given last week versus today.
Yep. Yeah, so this is for these supplemental services. So this is outside of Arrow Street's base contract that we approved back in January. So this is for land survey, geotechnicals, so that's borings, geoenvironmental testing, environmental phase 1 site assessment, wetland summary, hazmat, so that's all your potential abatement in the buildings, traffic engineering, the energy code model. So this is the one piece that in the distributed materials wasn't in there. This is actually going to occur during schematic design, so it's just in a different column. So that 16,000 wasn't, it was within this total, but wasn't listed. So that's the difference between the two documents. And then a 3D building scan. So the total is 101,698. And if I can just go back to the budget, so we had a budget of 100,000, so we're 1698 over that budget. But between we have 4,000 left in AE feasibility study, so we'll probably just draw it down from there. But again, the overall budget, we still have 7,182. So yeah, all these services will be during feasibility. Some will continue on into schematic design. So I guess Larry and Katie, anything to add on the services?
Nothing to add. That was the Teddy model was the one thing that hadn't gotten copied over. The packet includes the information. It was just not on the cover sheet.
And just so you guys know, that's part of the new energy code that was issued in July of 2023.
Does this include Mark's question about if anything from the landfill? I guess maybe that's the wetlands part, but
the phase 1 site assessment is where we'll see that. And phase 1 is the sort of desktop. Phase 2 would be actually going out and doing testing of the soils, which we anticipate happening later in the job.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, one quick and one longer question. Beals and Thomas has an exclusion to utility mapping. And it kind of raised a quick red flag with me. Both Trottier and Neary each have low water pressure, and it's a concern at the water department. So I have a feeling it's going to come back to us as additional costs, but I'd rather know up front, A, what the size piping is and where it's located for the water, and B, matching that to the water DPW master plan as to when they're going to correct the problem, because it may impact the cost of construction here. I just think we need to look at that issue and determine that maybe it's something the town should push forward to do so that those costs don't come at the school later. Utility, the water specifically, I don't care about the gas, I don't care about electric. But on the water, knowing we have a problem, if we're going to put 450 students down there and have to increase the water just quickly, what will that impact? Are the pipes big enough? And are we exacerbating a problem down there that already exists?
I would suggest, given all the conversations going on with Hopkinton on the water and the improvements that are already going to have to be made for them to tap into our water, I remember specifically when that came in front of Capitol, that the water pressure issue in the area we're talking about was going to be fixed as part of the improvements that they're talking about. So I would hope that whether it's Beals and Thomas or someone else, I realize the exclusion you mentioned, should be able to provide the data to the team here to, and also talk about the timing of it. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Kathy has a better understanding of that. So I'll let her, if she does, before I come back to Mark. So Kathy,
Okay.
anything to add on timing of Hopkinton and where that's at?
I can't tell you anything definitely. We're working to try to get it done. Hopkins got some issues right now that are taking precedence over this, if you have been reading what's going on there. But Mark, I agree with Jason. The plan is to fix the low pressure parts of the town with this. It's going to be a much better, robust system. It's going to be a single level, 2 tanks. So there's a lot of improvements that Hopkinton is going to pay for if this deal goes through. So hopefully it would solve this problem.
Yeah, my neighborhood's on that list too.
It is, absolutely it is.
The other quick question I had, and it's more, number one, Pier is doing the environmental, but the borings are being done by another contractor. Is there communication between the two contractors to place the ideal locations for these soil borings so that we're doing them that produce the results for both subs?
Yes, we provided to them, and we will provide again, a plan of where we anticipate, addition or new building would be located, so that the initial borings that they'll do will be strategically placed under those spots. This agreement for, the geotech company, Loloff, to do the actual borings and have Pier follow right behind them is something that we worked out together. I had a conversation with them on the phone. It makes it easier and cheaper, frankly, because they can do the same, the borings once, and share the information. So it was a
Okay.
strategic move.
And I guess my last question is, Pier in their proposal talked about 100-year storm and that there's a 1% chance that it could occur in any year. And I think the growing thinking is that it's a much different model than just a 1% chance, that over the next 30 years, we have a 26% chance of having a 100-year storm. And I just want to make sure their modeling is going to be robust and their modeling is going to be conservative. Because at some point, and maybe it gets asked now, what happens if we have a 500-year storm? And everyone 10 years ago would have said I'm crazy, but California just has experienced 2 500-year storms within the course of a month. And I knowing that this particular wetlands is a storage area for the Sudbury Reservoir system, when they raise the dams to hold the water back so Framingham doesn't flood, we get the back up. We get all the water backing up into our systems. And this is one of the biggest areas where that water comes in. The modeling has to be really carefully done so that we don't find ourselves with a 100-year flood that actually is a 500-year flood because of the what goes on with that water. So it may be a simple question to them. What would the additional cost be to just take it to a 500-year storm? And are we satisfied that this site is appropriate if we have that event? And I don't think it's a crazy question to ask.
Mark, the MWRA controls the water or the dam, right?
Yeah,
So have they done modeling as to what they think the water elevation will be in their worst case scenario?
I pray to God they have, but I don't know that they have. If you go downstream, you
Yep.
can go as far as Saxonville in Framingham, and they have 2 huge storm barriers, which they can roll these things across Route 126, and segregate that river, and they start raising the dams upstream, all the way up.
Right.
And I don't know that anyone has ever done the modeling on a 100-year storm, let alone a 500-year storm, what that means to Southborough. Because this particular location is a huge wetland area that just takes the material and lets it sit. We may not have a flood for 10 days after the event, but day 10 will be the worst because the water's backed up the Sudbury Reservoir system, comes into this wetlands and sits there. So everything that's flowing off of Strawberry Hill and all those other areas is just gonna sit there. We just need to be careful how the modeling treats this.
Okay, we can talk that through with them. We have for other projects modeled actual stormwater catchment areas.
Yep.
It wouldn't typically be part of this sort of kind of basic services or supplemental services in this case. But we can, as we begin to peel apart, figure out what that means and get you an update. I think also just to address the mapping typically means they're actually tracing the piping in the ground. What our expectation is, and we'll go back and check, is that they are locating all of the surface structures that may show up with the utilities, manhole covers, shutoff valves, things like that. And then they will be relying on the utility company's maps for the piping sizes that connect. But they're not actually going down and mapping it. And I think that's what the exclusion is, but we're happy to look into that just to be sure.
Yep, okay.
Anything else, Mark?
Nope, good.
Denise?
Yeah, I think I heard you say, which I knew is going to happen, is under a phase 2, we're going to have to do on the environmental of phase 2. We haven't got any money listed in here or fees to do a phase 2, which tends to be much more expensive. Should we be getting ready for that and putting money into this assessment of supplemental services? If more than likely we're going to have to do a phase 2, and that gets real costly.
Well, I think we should look at the phase 1 first and see sort of what the paperwork shows. If there is indication, then we may recommend a phase 2. And then you can either do that as part of the schematic design, which, you know, there's, as you point out, there's not money left in the budget, so you're looking for supplemental, or we do it during design development, which is when you've approved the whole project. And the question is, how much do we want to try to get that defined before the whole project budget gets sorted out? But I think at this point, let us go through the phase 1 effort first and get back to you on that question.
Okay, because as Mark pointed out, I mean, I think you're going to have to do a phase 2 to make sure there's no environmental issues there. I'm just worried about the funds. That's all, because we certainly don't have them here. So I just wondered whether we should start to prepare for, you know, phase 2 is always so much more expensive.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I do believe that once we get the reimbursement, Jason, keep me honest, that comes in basically as a grant and we can spend that immediately too.
You know, Andrew, Jason and I talked about that this morning. So I agree with you. I think that the money comes in and that frees up the equivalent warrant article money. You know, the town approved $950 to spend. And we didn't say net of the MSBA reimbursement, it was a $950 gross. So I do believe you could use the reimbursement to pay for any additional cost here, but we should check with town accountant tomorrow and make sure we're right about this before.
Well, so I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, because that would obviously give us a lot more flexibility. But I will, if the Skanska or Aerostreet team want to weigh in on that now, if they know the answer. Otherwise, we will certainly go to the town accountant. I think it's an MSBA rule, not a town accounting rule.
What do you think the rule is, Jason?
I think that my understanding, and again, Aerostreet or Skanska, please weigh in, was the feasibility number is what it is, and we'd have to go back to town meeting if we want to spend more than $950, even with the you don't get to take the reimbursement into account.
I actually don't think you're right, but one of us is right, one of us is wrong, so we just need to figure this out as far as whether
So I
that.
guess, Jim, do you have an
Sure.
answer or have knowledge of that?
So typically, in most districts, the MSBA requires you to appropriate the full value of the feasibility study. So that's $950. In most districts, it comes down to the borrowing for that amount of money. That amount comes in. So the district isn't borrowing the full $950, they're borrowing their share. So as far as the funds coming in, I would have to, because to be perfectly honest, I've not had this come up in very many districts. Typically, most districts are trying to limit their borrowing and what they have to pay interest on. So when those fees come in, they pay down their what they have, and they don't have to borrow the full $950. I would have to triple check that MSBA doesn't have any policies. But if the funds come in, they're available. As far as the project side is concerned, we can't spend over that $950. That is the one thing. It's the cash that comes in from the grant to the district. Can you use that? I know it would have to be on the project, obviously. That goes without saying. Those funds have to be used for the project, but I would have to look into that a little bit more on the MSBA side. But again, the typical is the district will borrow, we're around 30%. District will borrow 70% of that $950, assuming that other 30% is coming in from the MSBA. That's the typical setup.
We get that. We get that part.
Yep.
And the reason I think it may be wrong, you get in a circular computation if you say, okay, we can go over 950, we can add that 40% to it. So then that means that effectively MSBA didn't reimburse you for 40%, so they'd have to give you more. So I think I'm going to end up being wrong here, Jason, and Andrew, but it was a good try, right?
But let's do the due diligence. We don't need the answer tonight. It's an important question. I think we'd all like a little more feasibility if we need it. We don't want to spend it. I think everyone knows that. So let's just Kathy, you and I can talk to Carla, then we'll go back to Jim if we think we need an answer from MSBA. I'm also was pulling up someone's going to probably want to look at the language in the warrant article, which was not our language. That was the MSBA's language. And it was from the 2022 annual town meeting. So we may need town council as well. So Kathy, maybe if everyone's in agreement, just to keep this item on topic, we'll go off and get a final answer to that from whoever it may be, and maybe multiple parties we need to consult with. And I hope I'm wrong, for the record. Okay. So is everyone ready to vote, or are there any other questions on the supplemental services for tonight? All right. Then I will move that we approve the Neary School supplemental services for a total of $101,698. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Denise?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. Did I miss anyone? Roger, did I get you?
You got Roger.
All right, so I got all
You did.
7, right?
Good.
Sorry, I didn't have everyone on my screen. So, all right, thank you for all of that. I think good discussion, and look forward to seeing the results. Okay, next is feedback from the open forums. 4 out of 7 of us were there. We almost were more than, if I leave the ex officio members out, we almost were as many members as other members of the public that were there. I have a lot of words that probably could describe the attendance, but it is clear to me that the town has not woken up to this project yet. I will say, on the bright side, that I I found the conversation very engaging. And I found that the actual representation that we had there, albeit despite the very low numbers, it was not all school age parents, which was a nice, pleasant surprise to me, which created a good dialogue in it. It certainly, we weren't trying to just fill that hour and a half. It was a good back and forth between the residents, the committee, school administration, and our consultants during that time. So I don't know, others that were there have any comments or reflections on it? Roger?
Sure, just a couple. So I'd like to actually echo what you said, Jason. I thought that we had 5 folks there, but I think it was a decent cross section, of the community. Obviously, it's a pretty small sample size. But I also want to just a follow-on question to Jason's comment, which was clearly the community hasn't woken up to this project yet. When do we think the community will wake up to this project? And how do we define that? In other words, I'm just, I'm curious.
I think it's a very good question. I think once you start talking about some numbers and variation of numbers, right? Depending on, obviously, we just talked a lot about 12 different scenarios. We all can acknowledge there's going to be a huge dollar gap between some of those, right? So then it's going to be a balance between cost and all the great educational visioning that's incurred. I think that's going to be a point for some. And I think for others, it's going to be the town meeting vote. And it's going to be they have a predefined notion. I don't know what that predefined notion is, to be honest with you, of how much they're willing to spend per household to support whatever gets put forward. And then I think there are probably some that are just already have their mind made up, even though we have no idea where this is headed. That's my all conjecture, to be completely honest. But that's just my read as of now. And I think it will, I have further to say when we get into the surveying piece, which is our next agenda topic. So Kathy, I'll go to you.
So I ditto what you said, Jason. I think it's going to be the special town meeting. Special town meeting is going to be, this is going to be it. This is the topic for it. There won't be anything else. So I do think it will start garnering some interest in, but I am just shocked about the lack of interest right now. Maybe the next one will be better attended because we're going to try to advertise it maybe better. Maybe this was the week after school vacation week and that tampered or tamped down some of the parents coming, but I'm shocked. And I see this everywhere I go too. I look at people and they never ask me a question. I try to talk about it. They just say, fine. So I'm just really surprised this hasn't garnered more already. And I think that it's going to be special town meeting when we're going to hear about it.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I agree with you, Jason. I'm just echoing what you said, but I do feel like the website will obviously spark some interest. People can go to the website that can't attend the meetings. One thing I did notice was what everyone was taking from the renderings. I think is going to spark a lot of questions about what exactly is going to be in the school. There was a lot of questions around the spaces, and that could also lead to several open questions. But obviously, I'd like to see the next attendance if they have the same view on the conceptual designs and the renderings and what the feel and look of the classrooms and spaces are going to be. Should be interesting to see if they same feedback. I think we should just hit home that if they are renderings and it's not what the school is going to look like.
Thanks, Chris. Mark?
Good news is I think we're going to get at least 5 of the same people coming to the next meeting, so at least we're not gonna go down. Um, I kind of mentioned it after the meeting. That a lot of this work in the previous school go around 24 years ago was done at the school committee level. It wasn't done with this kind of a community forum talking about the educational process. It was the school committee that really did this work. So it's tough to gauge how something like this is going to shake out. I guess my quick comment is we need to get a banner up at the town center mentioning it. I think it should be on Zoom so that we can push people, even if attendance is low this time. There was a lot of information presented. And I know I'm not going to criticize anything because I think our presentation became a little less formal. When we go through the architectural of the sample schools, there should be more discussion of what we're looking at. And if I have any background, we need to really show what a classroom is going to be like. What some of the real basic things are going to look like, um, so that there's an element. Yes, we're doing a school here, and these are all the other features that can go along with it. I'm glad to see SOS has been involved in some of your meeting. They need to be relied on to get parents to go, even if it's one and the other's home babysitting. Um, but having it on Zoom opens up a whole bunch of other people, and may even open up the seniors, which we really have to tap into. There are, I guess I got to classify myself as a senior, but I have neighbors saying, what the heck do we need to do anything with Neary? They don't get it. And the more we give the information and get even if it isn't overly well attended, but we have 100 people listening on Zoom, that alone will just garner conversation and get things moving. I just think we really have to double down between now and next week, to get as much notice out there that this thing's happening.
So, thank you for your comments. Just in terms of communication, I do think if people have other ideas on how to get the message out, I believe the superintendent sent 3 notices out, which would have hit every school-aged parent in Southborough 3 times. I'm aware of community groups that target students that aren't even in the school system posting things. I'm also aware of every sports league or sports association in town asking their board members to come, right? Especially to think about the community aspect. And that's what we got. Again, it could have just been a bad night, but it wasn't the Monday after vacation either. But I want to come back to your Zoom comments in a little bit. We should talk about that as a group, but I'll go to Andrew first and then Roger.
So, I mean, I think unfortunately, I mean, I was here when we did the other schools. I was a kid, but I remember those town meetings were, and Roger can, and Mark could probably correct me, but those are very well attended town meetings when they talked about all the, you know, the trot ears, et cetera. But unfortunately, I would say right now, maybe we're at 1 or 2% of people that understand in town, and we'll go to town meeting. It'll probably be 5 to 10%. We'll go to the ballot. Maybe it's another 10%. And the rest of people will realize it once they get that first tax bill. After that bill comes in, they go, "Why did my taxes go up so much?" And they say, "Well, we just built a brand new school." And I think it's probably a little bit. The ratios have changed over the years, but I think that's probably pretty close to where we'll be at.
Go ahead, Roger.
Just a comment on the Zoom meeting idea. We talked about that a little bit after the forum the other night with that, and the trade-off, and I'd actually like to ask Arrow Street to comment on this. The trade-off is, you're gonna get some people that won't come because they can get on Zoom. And a part of this process is somewhat interactive, where you're trying to get feedback. We had some tables and some flip charts. You're trying to get feedback from the community, some ideas, maybe ideas that if we got one idea that the rest of us couldn't come up with, it's probably worth it. So, is it worth that trade-off? Is it worth opening it up to Zoom, potentially losing actual in-person attendance to get a few more people to watch it on the screen? Anybody from Arrow Street have a view on that?
Yeah, I think our experience has been, and I'm trying to think of the various meetings we had, but typically you'll get more people participating in a Zoom call or a Zoom public meeting than you will in an in-person one. Does depend, of course, on the meeting and the community and all those kind of things, but we can structure Zoom forums to mimic these sort of in-person activities. I would say, as many of you probably agree, they're not quite the same and they're probably not quite as good. But on the other hand, if you feel like the key is to bring people in, maybe getting up to 50 people via Zoom versus a dozen in person, maybe that's the trade-off, is you're getting more people and hopefully getting a larger commitment from folks who start to understand the project.
Thanks, Larry. Greg, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. The first is, although the first community forum wasn't attended, it was a good barometer for us. I think that's important. And I think, hearing Jim speak about the next forum, the third forum, where we might have more concrete information for people to react to. I think right now it's so abstract, it's hard for people to really grasp what we're thinking about and trying to do. So one of my recommendations is, I think, not doing the forum on the 11th, scheduling the forum for April that we talked about earlier, and really framing that with some more concrete discussion points from the visioning work that we've done thus far.
I completely agree with everything you just said. I'll start there. And want to take it a step further. So is there a thought that we could potentially do an in-person session in April, like we planned and discussed earlier this meeting? Obviously, date TBD, but also charge the communications subcommittee with what could be done via Zoom to supplement that, even if it's after the in-person date, like try to get the in-person attendance, or potentially record. And I do this, I don't really like recording, but record a 10-minute, 15-minute update. For those of you who are there, basically Greg and myself spent some time walking, like basically getting everyone on the same page of where this project is and where we haven't gone yet, and just leaving that out there, right, until we have a subsequent update. And I'm not volunteering to actually do that, but I'm just like basically try to figure out how we hit each of the groups, and then if people continue to not be engaged, then we just need to continue to do our work. But I think we will continue every opportunity we offer, depending upon format, will gradually pull more people into the process as interested parties. So, Andrew, is all of your item? Quick, let me go. Is yours on all of three of you on the same topic?
A follow-up to your topic is, two suggestions is maybe we do public safety building, because this is pretty good for a hybrid meeting if we wanted to have Zoom and remote, at least have people dial in. And then maybe Jason, you and Greg do, what is it, the Frank and Mary show or something like that, and we can send
That's
that
why I
YouTube.
did not volunteer to do this.
Am I Frank or is Jason Frank? I need to know that.
But do something on Sam or something like that we can then send the YouTube video around to people to watch and post it on my Southborough, etc. I mean, we can record a meeting, but I think the production value of that show versus a regular Zoom call might be more beneficial.
Did you just say production value?
Yeah.
Wouldn't go that far, but I think I'm sort of aligned with where that's headed, other than Frank and Mary. Roger.
My 10-seconder is that I won't assign Frank or Mary names, but I just like to confirm, I think the overview that Greg and Jason provided, I think it was great, and I think that just having that message go out, that recording go out, I think it'd be very helpful for folks.
Is that recorded?
It was, the other night was not recorded. It would have been very tough to record in that setting, to be completely honest, without like a true like Southborough Access Media there to do it.
I think it would have to be a separate recording,
Yeah.
Specifically, designed for this purpose, but.
Greg.
It'll be quick. I think we also need to just be more targeted in our focus groups. We know we have organizations in our community that meet regularly. We have the kinder care group. We have kinder group. We have NSPAC. We have SOS. We have senior groups. I think in having these very open come to us, we need to get to the people, and we need to know who those groups are and schedule times to meet with them and have these conversations and give them good information.
So before I get the temperature of the committee on what we've just talked about, would it be possible, I think I heard yes, but I want to confirm with Skanska, Arrow Street, and Greg, that we can schedule the April date tomorrow? Are there any obstacles that we wouldn't be able to schedule the April date?
No, I think we can get together and zero in on a date tomorrow.
Okay. So if we are able to schedule a date by tomorrow, or maybe I'll give a cutoff of Wednesday first thing. Is there anyone on the committee that's opposed to Greg's idea of canceling the March 11th forum and re-advertising for the early April, where there's going to be, I guess, a little more to talk about, probably a little less theory and more fact of what at least their work over the last couple months has told us?
So I agree with canceling the 11th.
Okay. Speak now. All right.
Well, I think it's good. I think I liked Greg's idea of maybe we do some outreach to the kinder groups, and yeah. So it's a little bit different of a format, but that can be done on more of an individual or a couple of us basis, tackling one group at a time or something like that. But
Completely agree.
and we're going to do something at town meeting, right? Some kind of update or presentation, or can we?
That's news to me.
I figured kind of like the Algonquin did before, like the year before we did Gronkplex, just like kind of heads up, this is coming down the future.
So I'll be very honest. I am a huge opponent to Article 1 in all the reports that we hear at the beginning of town meeting, because it takes an hour to actually start the actual substance. So if we think it'd be a really good use of time for the 100 to 150 people that will be there, I will go with the will of the committee, but I would gladly vote for no Article 1 to ever reappear again in the warrant. I don't know if it's there this year or not,
Yeah.
Kathy. I think we can, if we do the targeted approach, we're going to hit far more than 100 people. And candidly, the people we need to hit are probably not the 100 to 150 that are in the room, because those people are probably following what goes on in town and don't have an opinion yet. It's the other 7,000 registered voters that we need to educate so that we can get informed feedback to make decisions off of.
I totally agree that Article 1 is not something I support either, other than advisory doing its thing, because advisory reports.
Or you have to.
I know, they report to town meeting. Okay, so I don't think we should say anything, Andrew, at this meeting, because I think you're going to open up a can of worms and you're going to get into a long discussion you didn't intend to if you start going, because there's so little we know right now as far as where this is going. I just don't think that it would be productive to start the discussion at town meeting.
The only other thing I think of is doing a quick forum in between the first and second session, but if we wanted to take a room and do that while people were there.
Not opposed to the idea. Is there a first and maybe I'm out of tune. I thought it was just continuous.
There's not. It's starting at 10 o'clock, so there's no, they're going, people can leave for lunch, whatever, but there's no break.
Oh, we're not taking a break? Oh.
Nope. Well,
Never
we'd
mind.
have to, if it, right now, we're not planning, we're hoping to get done. We think there, not to bore people, we think there's a lot on the consent agenda, et cetera. So we think we're going to get done. MBTA got pulled tonight, so we think we're going to get done. So there is no break. Girl Scouts are providing food.
Okay. So Mark and Denise, I'll let you go, and then we're gonna just make our final decision on the open forums and keep going. So Mark first, then Denise.
God awful button. Just a quick comment. We shouldn't be canceling the meeting. We should be postponing it or rescheduling it. But as far as town meeting goes, I think we're required to report periodically to the Board of Selectmen. I think minimally we should have a well-drafted something from the Communications Committee, at least reporting out the progress and put it down on the table for people to pick up and read. At least we're being proactive at that point. And no, I'm not a fan of Article 1. For 40 years, I've hated the god awful thing because it takes up too much time. But
remember, we had a 12-hour town meeting last year, 12 hours. It ended at 1 a.m. because of all the stuff that we do.
so
No, all good feedback. I am worried about the campaign finance presentation, but whatever we decide to do, we can figure out what the rounds are, because that is obviously technically a polling place that day. So, Denise, go ahead.
Just again, I'm against Article 1 too. Just if we wanted to issue any kind of a updated report to leave on the tables, great. And I agree that we should cancel or reschedule the 11th.
Okay. And Kathy, I'll let you take the comment on select board updates. Mark is right, it is in our charge, but I know you obviously have a standing item on the select board agendas, and I'm sure Roger and Greg have one on the school committee. If at any point you both think, as elected representatives, that the full committee should appear before the board when we're at a certain point, you should just let us and we'll schedule it. But that's the whole point of having you on our committee too, is that you can provide regular updates without us having to have 200 joint meetings.
And I do that.
Okay. All right. So we are rescheduling the March 11th date. And we are going to narrow and undate hopefully tomorrow, but no later than Wednesday morning, with publication to come. Communication Committee is likely meeting on Friday. We will come back with where we need help on reaching certain groups, depending upon where everyone is best situated to help us. Any other comments on open forums? Okay. The next item that we had was related to the survey. And this was in my supplemental email that I sent out right before the meeting. Normally, I would have taken this to the communications subcommittee, and the communications subcommittee would have voted on this and gotten it out with Greg. but the meeting schedule just didn't line up. And I think where this is the first survey that's going to go out, it's candidly never bad to get everyone's opinion. So just to give some framework, so as the open forum was unfolding the other night, Greg and I were kind of whispering, talking to each other about, how do we engage people that are never going to show up to one of these meetings, right? Whether it be virtually or on Zoom or in person. And, we were guessing at how many were going to show up that night, but we were ready if magically people actually showed up, like for basically virtual polling through slides, as opposed to just having a one-on-one or one-on-five type of conversation. It's becoming very clear, and we wanted to focus on enrollment configurations. You can also think back to about an hour ago when we were going through that chart, that we just wanted to gauge the temperature of the community on where they're at, with no formal basis for their opinion, just to kind of see where people's temperature is on grade scenarios, et cetera, and to try have this be the start of many short surveys that can be sent out as another way of engaging the community. So the ask tonight is, if it's the will of the committee, to approve the content of the survey and delegate to Greg's team the survey tool, whether it be Google, SurveyMonkey, et cetera, to get this out this week so that we can start to gather data, because we think in particular the enrollment configuration views are things we want to get people's perception of now, so that we understand what perceptions are out there, so that we can do kind of a fact or fiction sort of exercise as this unfolds, and back it up with any sort of educational visioning that comes out of the process that's underway. So that's my opening, but welcome comments, questions, thoughts on either the content, the philosophy, approach, or anything related to it, with the intent to pull a vote at the end of this discussion. Denise, is your hand up from the last time?
Yes, sorry. I apologize.
So are there any questions, comments, thoughts? So clear cut that we're ready for a vote? All right, then I will move that the Neary Building Committee approve the NBC grade level configuration survey as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call vote, Denise. You want to mute too quick, I think. I didn't hear your vote. Can't hear you.
You're toggling it the wrong way.
Aye.
Okay, there we go. Got it.
Sorry.
Mark,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
and I am I as well. So that is unanimous. Any public comment? Meeting schedule, you all have the 2 weeks from tonight, the 18th, which is really is, I think Katie or Larry mentioned, a focus on kind of building components and the sustainability aspects of it. That's going to be the main agenda item. I'm sure there'll be other updates. And then I will get an invite out as soon as we know the community forum date tomorrow. And then I have given you meeting dates, which are essentially every other Monday with a few skips in there through the first week of May. I will get invites out for that shortly. There any other business for this evening? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Denise? Did it again.
Denise?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And I am I as well. Thanks, everyone. Good meeting, and see you soon.
Good night.